Hi, I'm Scott.
I'm Sharla.
And this is another episode of Humanity, Human-Shaped Learning.
And another one from Placerville Camp.
That's right. Still here by the cozy fire. Mm-hmm. It's Sharla just stoked it a little bit.
Yeah, we'll see if it gets going again.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll pick up. Oh, we got a nice big fresh log on there. So we should do that poem we do about fire, about placement of the logs in the space. Mm-hmm. We'll do that sometime.
Yes.
That's something to look forward to. But today is my episode.
Yes, I'm excited. I haven't looked at it at all.
Oh, that's good. That's terrific. That's what we try to do. We try not to look at anything at all before we just jump right in.
That's more fun.
It keeps it fresh. It keeps it really fresh. So we do know, though, we do have a game plan so that you don't think that you're in the hands of people who are just capricious and incapable. We do have a game plan, and today's episode is dealing with relational learning.
Nice.
Yeah. We've got these four kind of themes that we move around in, and they give us a lot of flexibility. So what we're actually going to look at a little bit is this big thing that everybody seems to be talking about, learner agency.
Yes. So important too.
Yeah.
And I don't really remember when I was in college. Unless I'm just forgetting, I don't remember learning about that.
I don't either.
Or thinking about that being something that's really important as my role as a teacher, to make sure that my students feel that they have that sense of agency.
You know what I remember talking a lot about? Affective versus cognitive, which is an important kind of thing too. Mm-hmm. Our students' emotional lives, their affective side is as important as their cognitive, but the biggest piece of that is, do they feel like they're in control? Do they feel like, are we doing things in a way that helps them feel empowered? Right. Or are we doing things in a way that makes them feel disempowered? And so,
I think it's a lot about hoop jumping too. If students are feeling like I'm just jumping through these particular hoops to get an A, or these particular hoops to get a B, it's not about whether or not I am invested in it or am excited about it or taking it even that seriously.
Yeah. Do you think that our teachers sometimes feel like they're hoop jumping too?
Absolutely.
Yes. I think there's also this thing called, maybe we should talk about this sometime, teacher agency.
Yeah.
We're professionals, educators, and obviously we our schools, our districts, our school boards have parameters for us to work within. But at the same time, if a teacher feels disempowered, I've even heard the phrase, this is a teacher-proof curriculum. Well, that's sad.
Yes.
Okay, so teachers are professionals. They're empowered to get to know their students and to do things for their students and to do things with their students. But also, that empowerment helps them to be able to empower their students to be in charge of their own learning, so that it's not the teacher just doing everything.
Right.
No. So anyway, as we usually do, we're going to start with a third thing. And today's third thing is, I did this the last one that I did. It's just an image.
Okay.
It's a photograph.
Okay.
But it's one that I thought was really, really, really interesting, and really struck me because I know a little bit about. There's this program here in South Dakota, and I think there are programs like it in a number of different places. But it's been really successful for the last several years, in which the South Dakota Symphony Orchestra hosts these week-long workshops where students who are aspiring composers come in and they work with a composer who helps them to put onto paper their composition. Okay, so it really is about learning some higher degree of like musical notation. Mm-hmm. They compose this with the assistance of a composer, but it's their composition, and then the South Dakota Symphony Orchestra puts together an ensemble to perform.
Oh, wow.
Okay, to
How
perform.
fun would that be?
And that's incredible, because how many people get an opportunity to do that? I mean, it's one thing Okay, you were in band, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And what did you play again?
Tuba.
Tuba. Okay. Tuba. I was a drummer.
So glad you brought that up.
I know you are. I was a drummer, okay, in band. So often, this is not to, okay, I don't want to diss our music and our band teachers, but so often, what our music instruction, at least when I was going through school, maybe when you were, it was about learning how to play, okay, period. Just learning how to, and that's great. That's fantastic. I'm glad that I learned how to play drums. And learned how to read notes that I could use. I still can't do anything but rhythm. But you, I'm assuming, learned tuba notes and how to shape your lips to get just the right tonal quality and how to empty your spit gate, whatever.
So many things.
So many things having to do with band. But here's my point, and I do have one.
Okay. That'd be great. I'm
It
just
would
kidding.
be.
I'm
It
just
would be.
kidding.
Here's my point. How often do our students who are learning music get to see themselves as creators of music? And I don't mean just being able to play along with the band, but I mean to be able to compose something, to say, this is a song that I created out of my, and I think probably more music teachers are doing that nowadays, because there's some technology and stuff that's helping with that makes it a little easier. But this is a project in which these students get to compose something that they really haven't heard the way they've envisioned it. They've plunked it out on the keyboard. They've laid down the notes. But then they bring in a chamber orchestra and they perform it and they get to hear it the way they had envisioned it. That's an amazing thing.
Yes. Oh,
So-
I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
As a young person, especially, to be able to see something you've created performed in that
know.
way. Wow, that would be awesome. I don't think I thought about this anyway as a student in band or taking piano or in choir, ever imagining myself creating the music. I don't
Yeah.
even know that was something that was on my radar.
It's kind of mystified. You kind of think, wow, the composers are all these gray-haired, ancient, old white men who lived somewhere in Europe and all this music spilled out of their heads, and now we sit down and play it. And we don't think about, no, actually there are people composing things all the time, and they just don't have the opportunity to have it become performed.
You're such a writer of music, a composer. Did you think about that when you were young? Did you?
You know what? All I thought about, and this is what most high school kids think about. I want to have a band.
Yeah.
That's what you're composing. So I wanted to, write stuff on my guitar and play it myself, or have a band and play and stuff like that, which is a very legitimate form of composing. But to think about having other musicians spend the time with this piece of music that I have composed, getting it just right, and then performing it publicly, that's like on a different level.
Yeah.
And that's super exciting. And it really, what it does, it says to a student, you're the master here. You are the one. You've put this together. We have practiced. We're getting together to do justice to what you have composed. And that's I think, huge when we talk about agency. So here, I want to pull this back up again, because what I really wanted everyone to look at was just this image, this photograph. What you have is a young woman who's a high school student who has composed something, and she's there with a professional composer helping her out. They're looking at this, but what she's doing is she's listening to a chamber orchestra perform what she has put down on paper, what she has imagined in her head. Other professional artists now are putting that, sending that out into the airwaves for her to hear and for others to hear if it's being recorded, which I think most of these were recorded. And that, I think, if you look at her face, she's just thrilled.
I was just going to say that as a teacher, the expression on her face is the expression I was searching for every day with my students. And until we got there, it just didn't feel right. You know, you want them, although they don't always have that kind of joy and energy around every topic, you hope at some point during the day, every student looks that way.
Yeah.
You know, that something strikes them as being so wonderful, lovely, important that they feel that way.
Right. And you know, and once again, I've presented this in the realm of fine arts, of music, but this is not limited to that. I think students, if we can find the ways, not just to go through the motions of showcasing student ideas, but to actually support them, give them the tools that they need and the support that they need to really pursue something that is coming from them, that they're calling the shots on, and then provide the space and the opportunity for others to see that and to see that this person came up with that. This person did that. And certainly that happens in fine arts. It happens definitely in sports. I mean, that's huge. But it should be happening in everything. It should be happening with in our science curriculum. It should be happening in our language arts curriculum. It should be happening everywhere because our students have these remarkable ideas. They have this capacity to self-direct, I think, as all human beings have. Sometimes we just, have to take ourselves and the system as it is and kind of move it out of the way to make space for them to do it.
I was just thinking, too, about how it sort of reverses how you see learning sometimes.
Right.
If you take something a student is really excited about, and let's use music.
Yeah.
Okay, so a student writes a piece of music. And then they sit down and they look through it and they maybe play through it somehow on the piano or something. And they notice something's off. Think of how much math, for example, is happening there. Yeah. As they notice, oh, shoot, I only have 3.5 beats there and I need 4 to be in 4/4 time. So suddenly, there's this other side of learning that is going on, but it's just so authentically happening that they don't necessarily think about it being within math.
Yeah.
So then a teacher who sees a child's love for something and then can help them see all of the things that they're doing, the things they're using to do this thing they love, it helps them see the importance of it in other places then.
Right.
I feel like that's a part of inspiring students.
Yeah. Yes, and I think what you made me think of is the fact that so much of what we do, because it is, and this is legitimate, holding up a master, whether it's a great composer or a great author or a great scientist or a great whatever, and having them learn a lot about that and have dig into that. In certain ways, that can be an opportunity for them to fall short. And all I mean by that is, if I'm trying to play a piece of music that someone has composed, I'm going to work for months on it, falling short of not quite getting it right until I get it right, okay? There's benefit in that, and I'm not saying that there's not, okay? But when we create situations where students can create something that is theirs, they are the expert. And they need both of those. They need both the modeling of being an aspiring apprentice, reaching to do something that a master has done. They also need the experience of being the expert themselves. I'm the expert on this thing that I've created, that I'm making. And let's celebrate that. And let's also have an audience to come in and listen to you as the expert on this, explain things that have happened. Or we'll ask you questions about it, like we do with authors and composers all the time.
Right.
Or scientists. Let us ask you the questions about what you've done with this experiment, how you set it up, and what you did. So I think looking for those kinds of experiences for our students is really important.
Definitely, yeah.
So, well, that's our third thing, and it was kind of I don't know. That was a little different than most of our third things.
It was great.
Okay, good. Well, I thought, well, the third thing is that student's face. You know, that image of a student's face, because I think for a lot of us that says like nearly everything we need to know about some of our students. We see that excitement and that enthusiasm, and it's like, okay, get me out of the way. You go for it.
And that's actually true. I really believe once you have a student in that place, they're going to do it whether you want them to or not. They're going to learn. That's
right. That's right. And what they're going to learn about you is, are you here to support me, or are you here to get in my way? And always, of course, every teacher wants to be there to support learning, not to thwart learning. I was looking for
support, don't thwart.
It's
a T-shirt.
You can use that for a quote in one of our future episodes.
Okay.
Just attribute it to me. So we're going to no, please don't. We're going to take a look at a brief article by Barbara Bray. Really, Barbara is one of the recognized folks who talks a lot about learner agency. And this is a brief article that touches on a few things. We'll pull it up there on the screen for you. A nice little picture of a young student who's got all these exciting academic areas and fields around her. And we're going to talk just a little bit about what learner agency is. And I think maybe have a conversation about why, I don't know. It seems like it's so hard. I think we all get it, but it's hard to practice it. There are just things that get in our way as educators that prevent us from practicing it fully. So one thing I'd like to start off with is her comment about the problem that we have. She says, too often adults treat children as though they are incapable of making decisions or holding valid opinions. As children advance through the system, they develop a form of learned helplessness that keeps them from advocating for themselves. The process for learning and the role learners play must be different than most adults experienced. You know, this whole thing of this attitude that I, as an educator, it's like I'm the one that's the expert in what they need to learn and when they need to learn it and how they need to learn it because they don't know what they're doing. And we don't think it or say it that clearly, because I think we'd stop if we said it that clearly. But oftentimes that's what our actions say. And what happens is they learn this learned helplessness where they're just saying, okay, tell me what I'm supposed to do. What's the next step, teacher? What do I do?
How often does that happen? You know, that just tell me what I need to get done.
Yeah.
I can remember students just wanting to be done with whatever it was that we happened to be doing for our work in that moment so that they could get on to the thing that, I usually had things they could do that were sort of their time. Like when you're done with this particular kind of work, you can do this other thing, when you have those moments. And, it's interesting how much students wanted to get to that point. And it's not necessarily that the thing that they got to do when they were done was sort of just free time.
Right.
But it was like the learning, it was a project or something that they had such interest in themselves that they wanted some time to spend on it.
But what's interesting about that really feeds into that learned helplessness because it almost makes two categories of things that we do in class. There's the category where we're doing the learning. That's the stuff that's painful to do, that you don't want to do, that I make you do. And then we've got the stuff that's the free time that, boy, if I got caught by the principal letting you do that, boy, I'd be in trouble. But, I know you're having fun, so it's a reward for you. But really, a lot of times, a lot of the best learning maybe actually happening in that time where they're doing the things that they really want to do. Incredibly important learning is happening then. And sometimes what they're learning during the really structured time that I'm calling all the shots is more about compliance than about really.
I think the most important thing a teacher can think about with this, though, is the balance of it.
Sure.
Because there are certain things, as teachers, we are required,
Oh, yeah.
as part of our jobs
It's one of
to
our
make
hoops.
sure that we are covering, we were hired to make sure that, in my case, 4th grade or 3rd grade,
Right.
that they accomplish these standards during that
Right.
time so that they are prepared to move through the system. And I know it's all about systems, but, it's like when there's a balance between this is the have to stuff and this is the have to and maybe not as fun stuff. And this is something where you have quite a bit more choice.
Yeah.
And also maybe some have to things in there, but you're able to package it in a way that is more inviting and open, and maybe more choice involved
Right.
for the student to be able to take that on. And so it's like balancing that throughout the day.
Sure.
To make sure that students aren't feeling like they're being spoon-fed or,
Right.
just under a thumb of, make sure you get these things checked off for me today, because
Yeah.
as a teacher, I got to
Right.
make sure they get done.
Yeah, because that's where that learned helplessness comes from. They're just saying, okay, what's the next box we need to check off? And I think it takes a lot of work. I think teaching takes a lot of work. Learning learning's a complex thing, and but if, as you say, if I feel like I'm being held accountable for my students mastering certain things, that makes it all that much more important that I figure out how to make sure that they have agency when it comes to those specific things. Because that's the other thing we know. When students learn something feeling like they have agency, that's what's driving it rather than a compliance sort of thing. It sticks. They really learn it,
Right.
And that's the beauty. So, taking a look a little further into the article, she mentions the Harvard professor Roland Barthes, who did some studies, and he observed that in the 1950s, when young people left high school, they typically knew about 75% of what they needed to know to be successful in life. But today, he predicts that young people know about 2% of what they will need to know. And that's not because, she points out, they're learning less than in previous generations. It is, in fact, because there's good evidence that they know much, much more. But the force behind this change is the rapid and ever-increasing pace of change, the complexity of the world in which we live, and the unpredictability of what people will need to know in the coming decades, the future for which we are preparing today's learners. So the bottom line is, if we're just going to break it down to stuff, we can't hope to make them know 75% of what they will need to know. So our goal has got to be something other than just making sure that they've learned this, this, and this, and this, and this, because we don't even know what they're going to need to know, because change is happening so fast. The jobs that they'll be working at, and people talked about this for the last decade, the jobs that they're going to be working at haven't even been developed yet.
I think it becomes about process rather than content.
Right.
What do I do when I come across something new? How do I engage with it? What are the things that I need, as a learner, to be able to take this new piece of information on? Do I need to be able to handle it and use my hands to touch it? Do I need to be able to spend some time thinking about it, listening to something about it? What is it that will help me be able to grasp whatever it is that's in
Right.
front of me? And that, if we have people who know themselves well and what they need, then it becomes any content you put before them, they're ready to take on because they know what their process is for learning.
Right.
I think for myself, if I can write something down, I'll probably remember it forever.
Yeah.
And so when I have opportunities to learn something new, when you and I are working on a project at work, I'm always writing in my journal. And
Yeah.
it's not that I'm writing my deepest, darkest dreams and thoughts in my journal. I'm jotting down things that are connections that are happening for me as I'm
Right.
thinking about it.
See, but that's part of it. You know that about yourself, and you feel empowered to do that. It's not like someone's telling you, now, Sharla, you need to take notes on this.
Yeah.
It's you knowing yourself, and I think that's a big piece of this, because that hasn't been our culture in education for very long. Okay, the culture has been we train and require students to do the learning things that we know will help them learn. So that which for me in high school meant I had these requirements. Anytime I did a research paper, I had these requirements that I had to turn in like 30 note cards that had my references, and it was like all this, and none of that stuff actually helped me. Now, I'm not going to say it didn't help anybody, okay? So don't, all you English teachers who still do that, don't get mad at me, okay, please? But there was no flexibility for me to do it in a way that actually was the way that I would do it. Now, that was the way that some people would do it, but it was not the way that I would do it. And so there was not this flexibility. So I think this is about changing the culture of how we think and how we view ourselves, rather than feeling like we are in charge of setting everything in place so that this is the way learning has to happen. We have the flexibility of knowing that we create the environment. We create, and it's got to be dynamic. Like what worked today may not work tomorrow, okay? And that's tough as a teacher.
So I have a question for you then
Sure.
related to that. So on a very practical side as a teacher, if I'm a person who wants to make sure this is all happening, but I still have the requirements of, what I need to show for my school board or
Right.
my administrator, how do you as a teacher then balance that? What does that look like from the teacher's side? Balancing out students, really, really working with your students to make sure they feel they have agency.
I think this is a good, I'll answer that in a second, but I think this is a good example of why it's important that agency has to be teacher agency as well, because I think if the culture in my district or my school is, well, we don't really trust these teachers to do what they're supposed to do, so we're going to make them do X, Y, and Z in exactly this way and that way and the other way, then within that kind of a system, it's really that much more difficult for a teacher to give their students agency, okay? Because if I'm being required to demonstrate things in a certain way about my students in really specific and non-flexible ways, then that means I'm going to have to be really, really specific and non-flexible with my students as well. And so I recognize that we work where we work, and we have to meet the requirements and the needs of our community and our school board and our administration. But I think as a whole, educators need to advocate for student agency, and that means at some level they're going to have to advocate for their own agency too. The creative approaches, flexible approaches that give choice and give multiple ways of providing the evidence and the data.
I think it's really hard too as a teacher. I was probably 5 years in before I trusted myself.
Oh, yeah.
And so when you think about new teachers or even teachers who've taught a while, but they're in a new setting or they're, taking on a new content area or whatever.
Right.
It's challenging, I think, as the person who's supposed to be doing all of this, to feel like they can, because maybe they don't have enough experience to trust that the learning will happen.
Yeah.
I can, at least when you have whatever it is your school's requiring you to do, your lesson
Yeah.
plan listed
I've
out,
checked
you
off all the
pretty much
boxes.
followed it. Whatever happens as a result, you can say, well, this is what I was asked to do. If you step out of that box
Right.
and say, as a teacher who knows about learner agency,
Right.
I am putting that as a focus.
Yeah.
And I'm going to trust that my students will learn, even if it doesn't look like what it's always looked like. That is a scary spot to be
Yes,
in
it is.
until you have enough experience to know that it will happen. Where you can also explain to your administrator, if they step in a classroom and it doesn't look quite like what they're used to seeing, to be able to say, this is why.
Yeah.
And I have enough experience and understanding of learning to know that if my students are doing this, they are going to accomplish what
Yes.
it is I've set out to.
Yes.
And they've set out to do.
And we've talked about this before. So if you out there listening, if you are a new teacher and you feel like you are a fake and pretending,
Yeah.
that's normal. That is absolutely normal. That's exactly how I felt. I think that's the way you felt. I think it's the way most teachers feel when they start out, unless they're just lying to themselves and everybody else. We haven't developed that capacity to see ourselves as professional. That parallels what we know about learner agency, because students, I think as human beings, they're born feeling like they're experts about things, but they learn when they go to school that they're not, okay? They've got to look to somebody else to tell them what they're supposed to do. And that's at some level a good lesson. I mean, if you're an employed teacher in a district, you got to learn that somebody in that community and in that school board and in that administration has the right to say, hey, here's what you need to do. You have to learn that, or you won't be employed for very long. But they point out in this next section, they say learners must understand, and I would say new teachers must understand, when they need new learning and how to learn what they need, okay? Now, a lot of times if we don't have agency, we just say, somebody will let me know if I'm doing something wrong, okay? You got to get to a point where you say, you know what, this is harder than it should be. I need some new learning. I need to learn specifically about this, okay? When they need to unlearn what will no longer serve them. New teachers and students who don't feel agency do not do that. You don't question, you just do, okay? At some point, you have to be at a place where you say, you know what? We've been trying to do this way with our math curriculum. We have not had any success for the last 2 years. I think we've got to do something different. Okay? Yep. And you've got to be in that position. And then when they need to relearn I need to learn how to read. When they need to relearn what they need to be successful. Okay? So it's about relearning something. Maybe it's something that we did in the past, but I've got to relearn it because I've lost it now. I've forgotten it. Our students need that, and that's how they feel agency. And I think all teachers need that. And that's why, I mean, we talk a lot about the importance of professional development, but how that needs to be driven by real educator needs and educators identifying and selecting what they need. Now, I'm not saying that there's never a time when a good administrator needs to say, look, looking at everything, it looks like we all need to do this. That sometimes needs to happen. But that's a higher level view, that doesn't address all the needs, because there needs to be the immediacy of a teacher saying and being empowered to say, here's what I don't have and I need to learn it.
I think too it should be happening just in authentic ways around their own work.
Oh, it doesn't.
I'm not necessarily waiting for an administrator to say, you need to choose some PD for this year.
Well,
but rather that, I can think of years where I had a student that struggled with something or had some sort of ability level that I was not familiar with. Mm-hmm. And I would just have to take that on.
Yeah.
And as reflective teachers and as teachers who are really working towards providing for all of those unique needs that our students have, I need to be in a place where I can acknowledge my shortcomings in the moment. Not that that's not a negative thing. That's just saying I don't have experience in that.
Right.
I need to either talk to somebody, I need to maybe take a class, I need to read a book, I need to do something that will help me be better with that.
Yeah.
And that's my part of my agency.
Right. And that's what I was going to say. It also, it doesn't have to, it may not come from outside of the school. It may come from a colleague. But there has to be that capacity. Part of agency is I'm willing to say, hey, I have a shortcoming in this. I don't know about this. I need to know about this. If we don't have a culture in which I can admit I don't know this, then it's going to be hard for us to have agency as teachers. Just like our students. If making a mistake is the absolute worst thing you could possibly do as a student, then they're not going to have any agency. They're going to hold back until they're sure that they can step forward with something that's not going to be seen as a mistake or an error. So there's got to be that room for learning. So I want to wrap up the article just with this bulleted list, and we'll just read through these because I think this is really helpful. So what is learner agency? Learners know how they learn best, are proactive in their learning, set goals and action steps for college, career, and life, develop learning strategies and skills to support meeting the action steps, select appropriate tools and resources for each task, and is future ready, develop curiosity to learn about the world with the world, self-direct and monitor progress in learning, reflect on evidence of learning, identify their passion and purpose for learning, and foster an authentic and meaningful life. And all of those, like we've said, I think have everything to do with learner agency and really us maybe just getting it really clear, maybe just even getting it really clear at the beginning of a class period or at the beginning of a day. My students want to learn, and they do know how to learn, and they know how to learn how they individually learn best. So I want to, as much as possible, create the environment in which they can do that. Doesn't mean I'm passive. It just means that I am making sure that they are active and not becoming passive because of me telling them do this, 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 and this. And I think we also need to keep an eye out for ourselves as teachers, that we're being empowered in that way.
I agree.
Wow. Scary silence. We solved it. Hey, I think there's a quote coming on. I can feel a quote in the air.
My quote, we have these categories that we think about.
Right.
It may be a little different than what you talked about.
That is fantastic. So you're going to get an opportunity we've just had this weird discussion about learner agency. Well, we're going to get an interesting quote that was selected, and we are really briefly, in a tiny amount of time that we have, because the music starts at the beginning of the quote, we're going to make beautiful connections.
Okay.
It's going to be
I'm going to trust that you have it in you to do that. All right. Here's the quote I chose for you today.
Terrific.
This pandemic experience is a massive experiment in collective vulnerability. We can be our worst selves when we're afraid, or our best, bravest selves. In the context of fear and vulnerability, there is often very little in between, because when we are uncertain and afraid, our default is self-protection. We don't have to be scary when we're scared. Let's choose awkward, brave, and kind. And let's choose each other. And that's by Brene Brown.
That's great.
I love
Well,
Brene.
Brene Brown is awesome. And I think that has everything to do with learner agency because, as you and I have talked about so many times, that idea of fear, okay, that she mentions in there, when we are scared, when we're feeling vulnerable and in a negative way and scared, that's when we relinquish our agency. We try to find somebody to tell us what to do. But the courageous thing in the face of that fear, if I've got a teacher who's creating the space for me to be able to do that, the courageous thing is to say, you know what? I'm scared, but I know that I've got the answers in me. I know that I can find them. Even in a pandemic.
You did it. Look at you with your agency.
Oh, man, no. I'm gonna get a mask that says agency. That would be weird.
Above it, you could say modeling.
Modeling agency. Modeling. Ooh. I just got it.
Good.
Wow.
I'm glad you got it.
Wow. That is great to end with a little piece of humor there. Thanks, Sharla.
You're welcome.
Well, hey, we will see you in the next episode. And we're entering into a brand new year. So we hope this year is getting off to a great start for you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.